Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another fun and exciting workshop here at SciFest Africa. I'm Abongile Jago, and today we will be composting in a bottle with the lovely Miss Marsha Kalika, who is a Chief Education Officer at the KwaZulu-Natal Museum and a familiar face here at SciFest Africa, as she has been actively engaging on our scientific platforms since 2018 and has been awarded on the outreach category in 2018 and 2019. You will find some of her previous workshops and webinars on our website. That's www.scifest.org.za. Please do engage with us on the chat section by telling us where you are joined in from, the name of your school or organization, and for any questions and comments throughout the session. Ms. Marsha, welcome once again, and over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Abongile. Hi, everyone. My name is Marsha Kalika, and I'm the Chief Education Officer for Outreach at the KwaZulu-Natal Museum. Once again, a huge thank you to SciFest and the KwaZulu-Natal Museum for making these online sessions possible, where we get to share fun science and interact with each other. In today's workshop, we will be exploring micro-composting and its benefits as we get our hands dirty by creating our own micro-composter. Okay. So before we start composting, we're just going to go through a little bit about composting. So what is composting? Well, composting is really a process where organic solid waste, and that is your kitchen scraps, maybe some leaves or grass cuttings, newspaper, cardboard, even some old bark that has been chopped up, so your wood chips, are broken down. And the term we use is decomposed. So basically, those organic matter or those organic materials are broken down into a humus-like material that we call compost. And so your compost will not only act as a fertilizer for the plants, but it will also promote that overall soil health. And what we mean by that is, as your organic material starts to break down, it will provide nourishment and nutrients to your soil. In doing so, that will reduce the risk of your pest or disease and also increase your microbial activity. And microbial activity, we're talking about your microbes. So that will be your fungus, your bacteria, and even protozoa. And you want to have those little microbes in your compost heap because they are responsible for breaking down that organic matter. In addition to providing all the soil nutrients and increasing your microbes, you are increasing resistance. In other words, you're building up like an immunity in the environment against environmental stresses. So say, for instance, you can have a drought or there's some extreme weather pattern. You build up that resistance in the environment towards that stressor. So composting is a great way to help out the environment, right? You are not just reducing waste by turning it into something useful, but you're also supporting the environment immunity or resilience. The one thing about it, though, is that it's a very slow process. So it's something that takes place from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. It's not something that will just happen overnight. But once it does take place, once you have your compost and it's added to the garden, it's going to increase those microbes, retain moisture, as well as nourish your soil to produce happy, healthy plants. And micro-composting, which is what we're going to focus on today, is really using a 2-liter bottle, because we're going to be composting on a very small scale to produce a little bit of compost. It is perfectly safe to use a plastic container, and it's really inexpensive. All right, so before we start micro-composting, we're just going to look at some of the materials that I have on my table. All right, so I've got some sand, and you want to include sand, because remember, sand has got nice pore spaces, so you'll have increased porosity. You want to have good drainage, so we always add some sand to our soil when we want to increase drainage for good infiltration. All right, I've got some garden soil, right? Some good topsoil is excellent. You want to add your soil because it holds a lot of the bacteria and the fungi, all right, even some larvae in it, right? So it's a good way to initiate the composting process. And then I've got some fertilizer. Now I'm using NPK, all right? So that's your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all right? You use a little bit of fertilizer, and your fertilizer is a great way to help those microbes. You want to keep them alive, you want to keep them well maintained, so you want to have some fertilizer, all right? And then I've got some kitchen scraps. All right, so if you look here, I've got some kitchen scraps, some potatoes, onions, peels, all right, and a little bit of garden waste. So I've got some scraps from the garden, okay, and then I've got some newspaper, and you can go ahead and you can add more than just newspaper. So you can add cardboard, maybe some wood chips, right? So I've got my greens and I've got my browns, and then I've got some tape, right, and a 2-liter bottle with some water. Okay, so you also need a knife and a scissors, right? So very simply to start, you want to take your 2-liter bottle and remove the lid, right? Because by removing the lid, just want to get a bit of view here. All right, so by removing the lid, you can take up the air, so you can actually squash the bottle down a bit, right? So okay, using your scissor, you're going to cut the bottle very gently, but not all the way through. So you want to leave a little bit of plastic on the flap. Okay. So let's just cut that bottle very gently. So you want to sort of have that, right? So you want it to hinge. You want the plastic to hinge. So you cut it, but not all the way through. And then I'm just going to add the lid back on, okay? Because remember, with micro composting, we're not composting as we would outside, okay, where we have oxygen. We are going to limit the amount of oxygen in this 2-liter bottle. So we're going to tightly seal on that lid, all right? And now you want to start adding your ingredients. Okay, so very simply, you want to layer your ingredients. Now, layering is very important. Firstly, it's going to assist the microbes in breaking down the material easily, but also it's going to allow for even distribution of your greens and your browns. Okay, so it's very important to have them layered, and if you have all the ingredients in order, it will help the process. Okay, so we're going to start by adding our garden soil with our sand. Now, the ratio that I have used is 1:3. Okay, so that means I've used 1 part of sand to 3 parts of soil. Okay, so that's your garden soil. So if you're going to put 1 handful of sand, it's going to be 3 handfuls of soil. If it's going to be 1 cup of sand, it's going to be 3 cups of soil, right? And remember, we are adding the sand to the soil for drainage. Okay, then you're going to gently mix that up. Okay, and I'm going to use my hand because I'm going to get my hand very dirty, right? And you can add about 2 or 3 handfuls, but I'm going to add. If you're measuring, about 3 centimeters is a good place to start. Okay, so let's just maybe add a bit more. Okay, there we go. Right, so I've added a bit of sand, okay, and some soil to the bottom. Remember, the layer of the soil is very important because soil is going to hold a lot of those microbes. And when I talk about microbes, I'm talking about the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa. So they're going to initiate or start that composting process, okay? And then you're going to want to add your vegetable scraps. So the trick with this is you're going to have to chop them up really small, okay? And the reason you want to do that is because it makes it easier for the microbes to start working on them, okay? So I've got some onions and some potatoes, and I've got some tomatoes. The only thing I would be a bit concerned about is you wouldn't want to add, if you were composting outside, you could sort of add, you know, plants that may have certain diseases, but because you're going to be micro composting in a bottle on a smaller scale and you don't have the oxygen, so you're not going to reach high temperatures to break down those diseases, you don't want to add anything that has any disease on it, okay? So keep that in mind. Okay, so with your knife, you're just going to sort of chop up on a nice surface your vegetable scraps. Okay, you can add some fruit, you can add some vegetables. You just want to chop them up so that they're a little bit smaller. Once again, so that it's easier for the microbes to work on them. Okay, right, so I've already got some chopped up. Okay, so I'm going to add some my greens. Okay, so that's your garden waste and your vegetable scraps from the kitchen. Okay, I'm going to add a layer of that. Okay, pop that in. Right, so everybody can see that. Right, who is actually composting with us today? Can we see some people that are composting with us? Is there anyone composting with us? Let's have a look. Maybe I can see what you guys are doing. All right. Is no one actually doing composting? All right. So there's your first 2 layers. All right. Now you want to add a little bit more of your soil and your fertilizer. Okay. So go ahead and add some soil and fertilizer, but now you want it to be a very little bit of it. So maybe like a centimeter of the soil and the sand first, and then you're going to add a little bit of the fertilizer. Okay, so not the same thickness as your first layer. Okay, so let's just add a little bit of fertilizer. Okay, now why are we adding this fertilizer? You want to add the fertilizer because it's going to maintain those microbes. Remember we said it's going to feed them. We want them to stay alive, all right? So you add the fertilizer. So if we go back, we've got a nice thicker layer of sand and soil. And then we've got our layer of greens, okay? And then we have a little bit more sand and soil. And then we have a layer of fertilizer, okay? But these are fairly thin layers, okay? Then you can go and add some more of your vegetable scraps, okay? So I just want to cut some more up. Okay, so we just add some more vegetable scraps. Okay, and I think here we'll just chop them up a little bit smaller, so it makes it a bit easier. Okay, to add it in. Just makes it easier for the microbes to work on them. Just chop that up. Okay, and just add all of that in as a layer. Right, and then once you've added in your layer of vegetables or your kitchen scraps, okay, and your yard scrap, then you add another layer of soil and sand. Okay, remember you want some good drainage. Okay, that, a very thin layer, and you add a little bit of fertilizer again. Another very thin layer, okay. There we go. Okay. Now you're going to add your browns because so far we've only added greens, right? We've added a lot of our kitchen waste and a lot of our yard waste, but now we want to add a little bit of browns. So this is where you're going to take your chopped up newspaper and you're sort of going to wet it. So add a bit of water. I literally soaked it a bit, okay? So you're now going to take your newspaper and just layer that on top. Fertilizer. Okay, make sure it's chopped up so it's nice and fine, and make sure it's wet. Okay, because remember newspaper has lignin in the cell walls, right? So they don't break down very quickly. So you want to add a bit of water in that so it's nice and moist. Okay, that's a layer. And then you can go back to adding another layer of soil and fertilizer. So we can mix a little bit more soil with some sand. Okay. So we're going to go 2 parts there, and then maybe a part here. Okay, and we'll add that in. And then you can go back to fertilizer again, and then we're going to add more of our vegetable scraps. Okay, so once you are done adding those different layers, you should end up with something that looks a bit like this. Okay, so you can see you started with soil at the bottom. And then here I've added some potato scraps to it, okay, and a bit of tomatoes and sort of like any veg that I had in the kitchen, so whatever it was, some onions I think it was. And then we added a little bit more of the soil, and then we added some garden waste, continued with the soil and the fertilizer, and you've got your newspaper, and then back again with the soil, and that soil is literally a mixture of sand and soil and then fertilizer. So those layers are extremely important because of that even distribution. And this is going to now allow them to break down. Now, when you get to sort of the top, what you're going to do is literally fold down that flap, okay, and take some tape, right, and you're going to tape it. Okay, you're going to secure that around the bottle. And the reason you want to do this is to make it airtight, okay, because you don't want oxygen to enter. Now, the reason I'm saying that is, if you were to compost outside in your backyard, you'd be using oxygen, right? And that is regarded as aerobic composting, okay? In this activity, we are going to use the method of anaerobic composting. That means we're going to limit our oxygen in this bottle. Okay, so we've sealed it with the lid, we've sealed it with the tape because we don't want any oxygen. Now, what that means is the organisms that would ordinarily compost wouldn't be doing that. We need anaerobes. Anaerobes are the microbes, so your bacteria, your fungi, that don't really require oxygen. They can actually survive whether there's oxygen or not. They would have to start composting. But because we've sealed it, the composting process would take a little bit longer. Okay, so it will take weeks to months to compost, and we're not going to turn this part. We're going to leave it just like this, okay? But the trick to this, and this is why I haven't actually done it yet, is to add water. So before you seal up your bottle, all right, because I want you to remember this, is you're going to add water. Okay, so let's just add a bit of water. Okay, let's just open this up. Okay, and you want to add the water so that it infiltrates, but remember that's going to be pretty easy to do. Look how quickly the water's run down to all my levels because I've added sand, right? So the sand is important because it's going to allow for that easier infiltration, drainage, and then we can go ahead and seal it up completely and leave it in the sun. Okay, so back to the importance of this. There are two really important things that you need to remember. For composting to take place, you have to have the water and you have to have the sunshine. Okay, you've got to have the sunshine. So if we are going to be composting in a bottle that is sealed where there's no oxygen, that is anaerobic composting, we're going to have to make sure that we put water in here. All right. So my suggestion would then be to use more greens as opposed to browns, which are your newspapers, because your greens have a higher water content, okay? They have more moisture. So you'd want to use more of that so that there is a lot more water, because remember, you're not going to keep on opening the tape to fill water in here. And it's not like outside where your compost heap is going to get some rain, right? So you'd want to use more of your greens as opposed to your browns, okay? And the other thing to remember is you're not going to want to use anything that's got even something like mold, right? Or something like mildew, more so, because you're not going to reach very high temperatures in the micro composter, as opposed to if you were composting in your backyard. And the reason being is your micro composter is going to have a lot more water in it. So it's never going to reach the higher temperatures as opposed to the compost that you grow in the backyard. Okay, so therefore it'll be a slower process and you're not going to create high temperatures. So you're not going to have heat that's going to kill those pests or those diseases, right? So ideally, you'd want to have more water. The trick is you'd want to add more greens as opposed to browns. You want to keep the layers, okay? You want to make sure you exclude the oxygen, all right? Because you go with anaerobic composting and you want to put this in the sunshine. And then within a few weeks to a few months, maybe 2 months or so, you'll start to notice that your level within the bottle will start to decrease, okay? And in other words, as the microbes start to break away that organic matter, it will start to shrink in size. So in other words, your layers will start to reduce. You end up having something that's a little less than what you initially filled, okay? And that will be more of like a humus, so like more of like dark organic matter. And that is when you will literally cut your bottle maybe 2 to 3 centimeters above where your compost now sits, and you can directly plant into that, or you can then use that in the garden. right? And you've got yourself some amazing compost. The reason why we have decided to go with anaerobic composting is because I want you to be able to observe and track the process of decomposition. I want you to be able to process, and I want you to be able to track, observe, monitor how compost is actually made, right? So you can start it in the bottle, and then once your micro compost is done and you feel that you are ready, you can then start composting aerobically, okay, using oxygen to compost. Right. So are there any questions? Are there any comments? Is there anybody that is actually composting? Maybe if we have a look. Let's see, is there anyone? Abongile, is there anyone joining us? Hi, Abongile. Anyone joining us? That's composting. I know there's a lot of people joining us, but is there anyone actually composting with us today?
It looks like it's quite quiet here on my side. I'm not seeing anyone composting. I don't know if they're hiding their faces.
There's a lot of people online, yeah, but I just don't know if they're actually composting. Okay, do we have any questions about this?
Okay, there is a question. It says you mentioned green and brown organic material. Can you give us some examples and the ratio, please?
Okay, so if when we talk about brown and green, we're talking about carbon and nitrogen. Oh, there we have somebody. Hi. Oh, he's watching. Is that Mariki Stone? Correct? Are you going to be composting today? Have you started composting?
Yes, I have.
Yes, I have. Okay, so there we go, Abangile. We have somebody that has started composting. Do you want to maybe show us your composting, your micro composter?
Okay, I'm bringing it.
Oh, yay! Okay, so in the meantime, Abangile, thank you for that question. Yes, so we're talking about green and brown. So our greens are our nitrogen, and our browns are carbon. And so ideally, when you are composting, you want to go 1:1 ratio. That's 50% to 50%. In other words, 50% of your greens, that would be your kitchen scraps. That would be things like vegetables, your potatoes, your tomato. Oh, there we go. Isn't that lovely? So do you want to tell us how you've done that?
I bite seeds and bite compost. Then we put it by the seed. Then we put the water every single day. And when I first wake up the other day, and I was shocked. It was growing.
Really?
And I have more.
Wow.
Can I show you more?
Please do. Please show us more. Yes. All right, so while we wait for Mariki, I think just to continue with that answer, so we have green and brown. So the greens are really all your nitrogen, and the browns are all your carbon. And you need a really good balance between it. So you want the 1:1 or the 50:50, 50% greens and 50% browns, so you've got some nitrogen and carbon. That balances your breakdown. Otherwise, if you're just going to break down vegetables like your onions and your potatoes and things like that, they are just the greens, okay, and they're going to be very slimy. So you want to add a little bit of the browns, so when they break down, you actually get that hummus-like material. Oh, look at that. Wow. Did you enjoy the activity? Was it easy enough to do? Yes. Okay, and what was fun about it?
I started to wait, then it grew.
Did you see any worms come out, or?
Not even one.
Really? So they were all microscopic, right? They were tiny, tiny, so tiny that you couldn't see them. But they were there because that's how you got your plants to grow, right? That's how you got to make your compost and get your plants to grow. Okay, well done. Very well done on that. Okay, so yes.
We used earthworms.
Oh, you use earthworms. Very interesting. Okay, well, that works very well as well. That works very well. Okay, well done. So like I was saying that you want to add that 50-50, but in the case of micro composting, because you're doing it on such a small scale, you want to add more of your nitrogen, so more greens and less browns, okay? And the reason you want to do that is because, remember, you don't have oxygen coming in here. It's not left out to the open air, so you're not going to have rainfall hitting your heath. So in other words, you want to add water. And so if you add more greens, more of the nitrogen, you're going to actually have more water, right? Which means you'll actually help the microbes break down the matter better. So I would obviously add more of those greens. And with that, just remember that the temperature will be a bit lower because you're going to have more water because you're going to have more green, right? But you'd want that to happen. You'd want that process to take place because it's anaerobic. Right. Any other questions? Abungile?
There's another question here, ma'am. It is, what is the best soil for composting?
Okay, so if you're going to compost in the bottle like what we've done, which is the micro composting, I would go with your garden soil, and then I would add a little bit of your horticultural sand or builder sand to it because it's a little bit more coarse. So I would go with some garden soil with a little bit of sand. Like I told you, the ratio stick to 1:3, so maybe 1 part of sand to 3 parts of your soil. That would work perfectly well. Or otherwise, you could just use potting soil. Potting soil would do the exact same thing.
All right. And can meat be added to the composter?
Ideally, no, I wouldn't add meat. That's because meat can generally carry pathogens or attract pests. So I wouldn't really add the meat. To the micro composter, definitely not. And that is because when you're composting outside, you reach really high temperatures, which is fine. But when you're micro composting, remember, because you've got the water content or more of your greens, you're never going to reach very high temperatures. And so because you're not going to reach high temperatures, you're not going to be able to kill anything. So I wouldn't suggest adding any meat to the micro composter.
And another question is, can eggshells be added to the composter?
Yes, I suppose you could. The thing with eggshells is I would wash them first, let them dry, and then crush them and add them, because raw eggs tend to attract some bacteria which may be harmful. So I wouldn't really just add the eggshells like that. Wash them and let them dry out, and then you can definitely add them. They're a very good source of calcium. So yes, most definitely.
All right. And what is the difference between anaerobic and aerobic composting?
Okay, so if we're looking at the aerobic, that's probably composting outside where you're using oxygen. So your microbes will thrive and your composting process will actually be much faster. In opposition to that, or in contrast to that, if you're going with the anaerobic processing like we're doing with the microcomposter, that is limiting the amount of oxygen. So in other words, you're composting in the absence of oxygen. And so obviously then your microbes would change. You would be using anaerobes that can survive with oxygen or without oxygen. But your composting process is much slower.
Okay. And how long does it take to compost in a bottle?
Okay, so to be composting in the bottle, I would say 6 to 8 weeks. But that now is very much dependent on whether you've actually chopped up your organic matter. So whether you've reduced the size, whether you've actually added all the layers. It's very much dependent on those layers and the size of the matter. But generally, if you've left it in the sun and you've met the requirements of the water and the sunshine, it should be between 6 to 8 weeks. And we shouldn't have much of an issue. Any
All
other
right.
questions, comments? I see that Mariki actually did a very good job with the compost that they've made. It looked really good. Did you see that, Abangile?
Yes, it looks amazing,
It
Mariki.
does, it does, it does, it really does. I mean, this is a great way to reduce your waste. It's a great way to just get rid of it, but you're not just reducing it, you're turning it into something useful.
Useful, yes.
You know, so you can then go and reuse it in the environment. You could plant in it, you could, it's actually quite amazing.
Yes, definitely. I can't wait to see how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I know. I'm just sort of going to keep it in the sun. I want to ask Mariki, how long did it take for yours to compost? Did you do it before, or did you start it? When did you start it? I'm not sure if he can hear us, but he did a great job. All right, I think he's gone off the picture. All right. Anything else, Abungile?
Nothing on my side, ma'am.
All right. Something very interesting that I actually found out, though, you could actually make, fertilizer from some of the stuff that we've added. So, for instance, with your grass cuttings, you could literally cut them down and you could add them to a bucket of water. Obviously, you'd want to cover that because you don't want mosquitoes and stuff being attracted to it. And if you just stirred it every day, within about 5 days, you could actually have yourself some liquid fertilizer. So that's one very interesting way, to actually substitute your fertilizer. Even your eggshells, you could dry them out and crush them down into powder, and then you could also chill them in and use them as fertilizer. Just remember that with your micro composter, you're not going to be turning this. Usually with the compost heap, you tend to turn it. You're not going to be turning this because it's going to just sort of compost in the bottle. And you'll know when it's composted because your layers will reduce. And you wouldn't get an odor with this either because it's obviously sealed up. So when you do open it, you'll just have that very rich organic compost. That would be excellent to use in the garden. I mean, what a great way to recycle waste, right? To really use it and create something else.
Yes.
It's actually a better way to do it. Okay, I think everyone else is maybe taking notes. I don't know, is there anybody else that wants to show us maybe what you're doing or maybe how you're going to use this later on? Oh, see, Mariki's actually showing us some plants. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Can you unmute? Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, next. This is a fly catcher.
So did you plant that into the compost after you composted?
No, I bought it, but then you know how to make them actually grow?
Yes.
It's like 200 rand for one.
If you had to buy it, correct.
But I didn't plant it with seeds. They just found it.
And then you started growing. Okay, so you see, Abangile, if you have to go purchase compost, it's so expensive. And here you can actually make it using all your waste, and that could be your fertilizer, for your plants.
It's with boiled water. You let it cool off. Then you throw in this thing a little bit. Then you put it in there. Then it grows. But the plants, some of the plants die. Then they grow new ones.
Of course, your old shoots
and they
must
eat
die.
flies.
Oh, okay. How interesting.
It's alive.
Okay, so you see, Abangile, he's picked a plant that's very interesting. Hey.
Yes, I see it.
Something different. He's obviously wanted to plant something different. But you see, this is what it's all about. It's about being diverse, you know, finding other ways of doing things that makes it interesting.
I have a Christmas tree.
You have a question? Go ahead and ask.
Christmas tree.
Oh, you have a Christmas tree party? Okay.
A baby one. A
A
baby.
little one.
For real. It's like one what you can grow. It grows.
Okay, and then you're going to add some compost around it to keep it growing, right?
It already have compost.
Very good. You see, he's gone ahead and he's already added compost.
I bought it. And even I have a granadella.
Uh-huh.
But I bought and this thing, I don't know what.
Yeah, I think he wants to show us. So this is actually, like I was saying, very simple to do. I'm sure there's a lot of people, I can see because there's a lot of people online, but it looks like they're taking notes.
I don't know what it is.
Okay, all right, we can see it, yes. Okay, so he obviously loves planting.
Yes, and now he can actually make his own compost.
Exactly, to help the garden. I mean, why not? And even your own fertilizer. Oh. See, he's got lots of plants to show us. Look, that's excellent, excellent, Mariki. All right, so like I'm saying, this is it's a very easy process. The plastic bottle is very safe to use. All right, that's excellent. Okay, so like I'm saying, this is a very easy process. It's very simple. It's inexpensive. We're just using a 2-liter bottle. So we're just going to recap. Once again, we want to follow the method of anaerobic composting. So we obviously want to not allow oxygen. Okay, very important. So we're going to close off the top of the bottle using our lid. And once we add our layers, we're then going to seal it off using the tape because we don't want the oxygen. And it's quite amazing, Abugile, that you can actually compost without oxygen. I mean, it will reduce the whole odor, but you're going to use your anaerobes to actually get compost out at the end. And so obviously you could remember the layers are very important. So you want to start with the soil, but you're going to add sand to it because you want good drainage. And then you layer your vegetable scraps. So that will be your kitchen things, your kitchen scraps. So it'll be like your potatoes and onions and tomatoes, even your yard waste, the green stuff, because it's high in nitrogen content. So it's got a lot more moisture. You want that water, all right? Because remember the requirements of composting is heat and water. So you've got your sunshine and you've got your water. And then you're going to add more soil, but a much thinner layer of soil, and you add the fertilizer because the fertilizer is so important to keep the microbes alive. You want to maintain them. And then you add more vegetable scraps, and then you can add some more soil and some fertilizer, and then you can add in the carbon. So that's where your cardboard and your newspaper, all of that comes in because you want that carbon content. Remember, it takes a lot longer to break down, but you have to add the carbon to the nitrogen. So you've got to add the brown to the green, so you don't just get slime. You want to get, you know, some of the organic matter. And then you're going to add more soil and more of your fertilizer. And you keep layering, and then you seal it up nicely and give it some sunshine. And you know, within a couple of weeks to a couple of months, you'll have some good compost. And you can plant it, or you can just, you know, use it in the garden, which is really great. So yeah, I hope that was really interesting. We didn't see much. I'm sure everybody was taking notes to go and try it.
I hope they're taking notes too.
Yeah, I can see you've been taking some notes. But you know, I must say the last 3 sessions with the candle making and the seed paper, the planting the seed paper and the composting, they're really good ways of reusing your waste, you know, recycling that waste into something that is more beneficial. And the composting is one way to really, really take all that waste and turn it into something that's actually usable. You know, we can reuse it in the garden, and it's, yeah, it works really well. So from my side, if there aren't any comments or suggestions. Oh, I see a comment here. Did you see that, Abungile? It says here, We can't hear anything. Sound on device is at its loudest. Please send us the link. Cypress?
Yes, I saw it. I think they're having a technical problem on their side. I saw it.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Because, yeah, I think they're trying to communicate with us, but there's obviously a technical issue. Yeah. So I really hope that when people start to actually go back and start to make it, please send us your pictures and send us your comments. We want to see some photos. We want to hear some comments. And you can share it and tag SciFest and the KZN Museum. That would be really, really great because we'd be able to then communicate with you.
I have a Cronadala.
Oh, I think some of their sound is restored. All right, that's excellent, Mariki, that's excellent.
Nathan.
All right. Thanks, Abungile. Thank you, SciFest. Thank you to our audience. I hope you guys, when you go back, those who've been taking notes, go and try it and send us some pictures. Because I mean, we really, really want to see some pictures.
Thank you so much, Ms. Marsha, and thank you everyone once again for joining us today. And I hope you all enjoyed the session. And please don't forget to check out our website to register for all the amazing upcoming workshops and webinars. That's www.scifest.org.za. And hopefully this is not the last time we are seeing you here, Ms. Marsha, and your amazing workshops. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.